Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive Tech live on YouTube. I hope you're having a fantastic Thursday. Oh my God, it's the 16th. Can you guys believe it? We're already halfway through June. How is time moving fast? Not fast enough because we still can't order the dang M2 MacBook Air. I want to see this machine. Seriously, like it looks so good in all the renders because I'm a huge fan of my MacBook Pro chassis design, with the rounded back and the flat front, and seeing that just slimmed up and even thinner. And at the same time, we're also getting these new reports on the M2 leaked benchmarks, which makes sense because there's likely at least a couple people testing these MacBook Airs in the public in the wild now, whether it be Apple employees or maybe there's NDAs that have been signed and YouTube channels and stuff are testing them out and running Geekbench on them just to see what they can get. And these leaked results are already, to be expected, looking pretty dang promising. But Mac Rumors in particular brought up an excellent comparison in regards to single core performance. So keep in mind, this doesn't account for everything, but just at least one thing I wanted to highlight for you that they picked up on. The 13-inch MacBook Pro with the M2 chip, at least according to these Geekbench 5 results, is outperforming the base model Mac Pro. Which doesn't sound right, because this is such an old design. I think I remember the first 13-inch MacBook Pro, with the two Thunderbolt ports and the Touch Bar and Touch ID. They've been kind of shipping that kind of look of MacBook since 2016, I think is when they started. I mean, they adjusted it when they brought back the Escape key and they switched to the Magic Keyboard, but that overall fundamental footprint with that kind of square chamfer design and stuff hasn't really changed, but they just pop an M2 chip in there, and so they give some samples of the average Geekbench 5 multi-core. Oh, sorry, this is multi-core score. Mac Studio with the M1 Ultra gets well over 23,000, which beats the 28-core Intel Xeon 20,000. And yes, guys, I know Geekbench scores are not everything. Geekbench is not the deciding factor on performance. There's a lot of different use cases, but it helps to have one measurement, one standard to kind of compare Macs back to back with. And down here we have the Mac Pro with the 8-core Intel Xeon chip, which got just over 8,000 in multi-core. And then where is it? Right here, the 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2, based on that result we got, was over 900 points higher than the base model Mac Pro, which is kind of incredible. Even though that may not translate to how that performs with sustained loads and that kind of thing. And I'm sure the GPU in this can probably outperform an M2, but that gap between x86 and ARM gets closer and closer. And in the case of the M1 Ultra already beats it. So just kind of seeing those leaked results, and the nice thing about Geekbench is that you don't have to buy the product itself and unbox it. You can just actually look it up and see what the results are and compare that, and that gives you kind of a perspective on what to expect when it comes to M2 performance. So the fact that this little laptop starting at $1,300, at least in the multi-core department, is beating out these Intel Xeon processors with these big machines. I mean, for one, it says a lot about how bad the base processor was in that Mac Pro. I was never really interested. I never reviewed it, and I thought it was disappointing when it first came out. I was never a huge fan of the cheese grater Mac Pro that came out in 2019. Hey, thank you for the super chat, Option Command Media. He said, would you consider John's MacBook Air leak accurate? Probably not. I don't remember it very closely, to be honest, but I remember it had white bezels, and it definitely ended up not having white bezels, and they thought it would come in the same colors as the 24-inch iMac, so I'd say not accurate there. They thought it would have white keys, didn't have white keys, and they thought one USB-C port would be on the opposite side. That didn't happen, so no, I guess I wouldn't particularly consider it accurate. Mac Pro sales are plummeting for now, I guess. No, I think they've been plummeting for a while. I would love to see the data. Apple doesn't publish this stuff for good reason. It would probably make them look bad. But the sales of the Mac Pro, I bet, kind of were pretty high at first when it first came out, because anybody who worked in studios or with companies and needed that kind of processing power, they were willing to buy it, drop 30, 40, $50,000 on their machine day one as soon as they could, because they're going to save money with that, because in some jobs time is money, and the faster you can export content or the quicker you can render things, then the more money you save. So those big YouTube channels and those big brands that bought the Mac Pro day one, I bet sales were pretty high. And then over time, I think they slowly started to peter off. And within like a year, because it wasn't even like the first cheese grater Mac Pro started delivering at the very end of 2019. It was like December of 2019 that came out, I remember. And then in Dub of 2020, they announced the Apple Silicon transition. And, you know, they didn't announce any new hardware other than the dev kit, but that doesn't really count. But at Dub in 2020, they were like, Apple Silicon is going to be far more power efficient and yet have way more performance than any of our Intel machines. And, like, we promise that we're going to transition our entire lineup within 2 years. So it was only 6 months in between the launch of the Mac Pro till Apple saying, by the way, all of this Intel crap is going out and we're going to beat it all with our own chips. So I feel like once the Apple Silicon transition was announced, the number of people that could justify the Mac Pro, it was like, I bet sales were close to flatlining. I mean, I'm sure some people bought them. I'm not saying they were zero, but I just feel like once Apple confirmed that there was this big transition taking place and that all of these new chips that are coming out over the next 2 years, which in the grand scheme of the length of a Mac is not very long. You know, most people own Macs for at least 4 to 5 years, sometimes longer. You know, some people will hold on to it for 8 or 9, 10 years. So I imagine that someone in the market for a $10, $20, $30,000 Mac would not want to buy yesterday's tech when it's basically guaranteed that there will be a new Mac Pro that will be faster, that will be better within the next 2 years. Because at least with the Mac Pro market, those don't get updated very frequently. That's not like an iPhone. That's not like well, there's always a faster one around the corner. It's like, yeah, but if you're dropping 30, 40 grand on this machine, you're going to want something that's at least a little cutting edge, you know, a little at the front. So I don't know. I want to work at an Apple store, and I think I'm going to have a hard time explaining that. Good point, Andrew. And thanks for, I didn't get to thank you, but Andrew Rogers became a channel member while I wasn't live. So I just wanted to say thank you for supporting, Andrew. I really appreciate it. Let's see. For my use case, a 2017 MacBook Air combined with the M1 iPad Pro works well. I hope it continues to work well for you. I am struggling to find uses for my iPad at this point, but don't get me started on that, because then this whole stream will just turn into another iPad rant, and I've done so much iPad ranting over the last 3 days. I'm kind of done with it. It's kind of like Meanwhile, let me answer this question. I was hoping to see an M2 Mac Mini. Me too. I was trying to speculate on why they didn't do that, because, you know, in November of 2020, they launched 3 M1 Macs, none of which were redesigned, but they all got the M1 chip. It was the Air, the 13-inch Pro, and the Mini. And at the Dub, we got the 13-inch Pro, the new Air, but no Mini. My best theory is it's because there's a chip shortage and they can only manufacture so many chips right now, so they intentionally chose the machines that likely have higher margins. M2 MacBook Air starting at $1,200, M2 MacBook Pro starting at $1,300, which, by the way, for the record, that will be available to order tomorrow, I believe. Didn't Apple make a post about that? Unless I'm totally misremembering this. No, yeah, I was right. Okay, here, I'll pull it up. 13-inch MacBook Pro with M2 available to order at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. Just to spoil it all for you, I do not plan on ordering one of these. Not just because it's early in the morning and I don't want to wake up that soon. But I also just am not really impressed with this design because of how dated it is and how recycled it is. And I'll get a chance to test the M2. For the record, I do plan on picking up, just to review. I'm very, very much not planning to keep. But I want to check out the M2 MacBook Air when it comes out, because that's a new design. It's a redesign, and I love the new midnight color. So I want to see what that looks like in person, and I want to do some, I want to eventually test out the M2 chip, but just not like this. This isn't how I want to experience that. So I don't plan on ordering one, but in case for some reason any of you out there want an M2 MacBook Pro, just keep in mind MacBooks are very back ordered right now. And Apple is still having a hard time keeping up with supply for the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro. So if you're a diehard Touch Bar fan and you really want this MacBook, you better be ready to order it 5 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. I don't plan on ordering one of these. I plan on ordering two. Yeah, that's right, Mike. Oh my God, M2 Pro isn't ready yet, obviously. Oh, if 9 to 5 Max leaks are to be believed, says Mike, then M2 and M2 Pro Mac Mini will likely come out together, and M2 Pro isn't ready yet. Yeah, I think Gurman was saying that the M2 Pro might be ready fairly soon, at least late this year, maybe early next year, which is definitely a lot faster than, there was a year between M1 and M1 Pro, but most of the rumors right now are suggesting that there's only like 6 months between M2 and M2 Pro, which is a little weird. Studio Display is still delayed for 8 weeks. Really? That's fascinating, because I would have thought the Studio Display, considering the price and the feature set, that not very many people would buy it. But yeah, this is why Apple does this, because a lot of people will buy these things. I plan on buying a MacBook Pro. I want to try the Touch Bar, to be honest. I'll just try to warn you, Drew, because I really loved the Touch Bar, and it's the biggest thing I feel like I'm missing out on with my current MacBook Pro. But that's also saying a lot, because I don't feel like I miss out on much. Like, I love the performance of this MacBook. Sorry I'm not using continuity camera today. It's just been so buggy. I did a member stream with it a couple days ago, and I love continuity camera. I want it to work, and 90% of the time it's working great, but that last 10% is miserable, and it causes the stream to crash, and it messes with the audio, and I have to switch the audio sources back and forth. So until this is working more reliably, I think I'm just going to default back to using my MacBook webcam. But yeah, like, the speakers on it are fantastic. The battery life is insanely good, and I love the 120 hertz on the display. The one thing that just feels a bit weird is, the last time I used a MacBook Pro for work, for like extended use, that Touch Bar was amazing. I loved it because I do a lot of texting. I type on Discord and I type in iMessage a lot, and just having the predictive text or the emoji selector right there, being able to swipe the volume back and forth is great. And the brightness settings and picture-in-picture button on YouTube, I use that constantly when I had it. But they're clearly not keeping it around. A lot of people are unhappy with the Touch Bar, and they scrapped it on the new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. I'm very much convinced the only reason the Touch Bar is still on the M2 MacBook Pro is just because they didn't want to change the manufacturing approach at all. They essentially just want to, excuse me, they just want to pop out the M1 and start putting in the M2 and change as little as possible, because that simplifies manufacturing and they can pump these laptops out really quick. So I don't think they're keeping the Touch Bar for, well, some people want it. It's like, long term, I do believe they will axe the Touch Bar. So I think it's a dangerous thing to fall in love with, because it's like, it's not going to make it. And I'm very much convinced it's not going to stick around for the long haul. So I would say, if you can not fall in love with it, don't get used to it, the better, because I'm already going through this whole process of learning to not have it and learning that it won't stick around. And this is hard. I don't want you to go through the same process I have to go through of like detaching from it, because Touch Bar ain't sticking around. It might be on this MacBook Pro for another year and a half, but after that it's going away. Are you using any widgets on your lock screen? I was for a while, but I wanted to try out the perspective overlay thing. It's kind of this weird thing I love, where the like wallpaper goes in front of the time. I don't know what it is. I love displays that make it hard to know what time it is. Which sounds so weird, but something about it makes it feel more immersive to me. Just having like the wallpaper kind of cover up the time, or like you can barely read the watch face and stuff. I don't know. It's visually appealing to me. So I found out that if you have the widgets, then this wallpaper trick doesn't work. So I wasn't honestly using the widgets that much. I think that I might use more when third-party widgets come out. But for the first-party widgets, it's basically like battery percentage, which is kind of cool to have right there on the lock screen. But I realized it wasn't really useful info to me. I wasn't like, it was either AirPods or my Apple Watch. And most of the time they had plenty of battery life. My Apple Watch, I usually end the day with like 65-70% charge. So I was like, why am I keeping this on the lock screen? And then I had a few stocks, but the stock market's all going down anyway. So there's like, I don't need to check the stock price of certain shares of companies like every time my lock screen comes on. And I wanted to try the like depth perspective thing. So let's see. If you have an M1, don't worry, don't spend the extra money. Yeah, I'd probably agree. I mean, I know some people that literally will take any performance gain they can. But I feel like those people have already bought, 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. The M2 is like this kind of weird in between. I was seeing some people in the member stream yesterday mention that the M2 single core results. Wait, do I still have those queued up? No, I closed the tab. Sorry. The M2 single core results are coming quite close to the binned M1 Pro results, which is kind of cool to imagine that like M2 non-binned starts to bump up, at least in the CPU department, not the GPU, because the M1 Pro still has like a 16-core GPU or binned 14-core GPU, but that's still better than M2's 10 cores. So I like the idea that there's a bit less of a gap now between where the M1 Pro sits and where the M2 sits. Let me see. Yeah, they have it here. The multi-core for the 14-inch MacBook Pro with M1 Max is $12,000. Okay, so that's a bit higher. They don't have the multi-core for the binned M1 Pro here, but I believe last I checked it was pretty close. They're getting pretty neck and neck. I do mean multi-core, sorry. Big stonks, right? Which of your Apple devices are you more enthusiastic about for one reason or the other? It's a toss-up between my MacBook Pro and my iPhone. My iPhone 13 Pro just has incredible battery life, and the camera's really good. And I love now that I can use my iPhone camera as a webcam. Again, it's still buggy, so hopefully it gets ironed out by the time the public release comes out. But I guess maybe more my MacBook Pro, just because it has these like record-breaking aspects of it. This, it's a phone. And, there's a lot of phones, and a lot of phones compete with each other, and a lot of phones have fancy cameras and big displays and high refresh rate displays, and that's pretty common. But like as far as laptops go, the machine I'm using right now is like the longest battery life of practically any Apple device, phone, tablet, anything. Like this is the biggest battery life you can get. Like they put in the largest physical capacity battery you can, and then a very efficient chip that can also scream and get a ton of performance out of it. And it's also the largest mobile display Apple sells. As far as a display that you can take with you, this is as big as it gets, and it's mini LED, and it's 120 hertz, and the speakers get really loud. So it's like, it's all these record-breaking things in terms of any Apple product. So I guess I would say my MacBook, I look forward to using it every day. The one and only downside, which is kind of an inherent design characteristic, is just that I'm kind of used to editing and working on bigger 27-inch displays, and the 16-inch display is kind of small. So there's no way around that. They can't make a 27-inch laptop, or should they? But that's a good question. Thank you for asking what I'm most enthusiastic about. This is just the machine I feel like I have no interest in upgrading in any form of near-term future. Like there's some pretty obvious things I would like them to update. Like I don't plan on getting the iPhone 14 or the iPhone 15. I want to do a more long-term ownership experience with this phone, but it would be nice if it was Thunderbolt. It would be nice if the camera bump wasn't so huge, but there's not really a way around that these days. I don't like the steel. It's very fingerprinty and glossy, and I would have preferred an aluminum chassis or a matte finish. So there's more obvious things I would change about this. With my MacBook Pro, it's like, yeah, I guess HDMI 2.1 would be nice, but I'd probably never use it. Um, I prefer Thunderbolt anyway. Uh, the aluminum design looks great, and the battery life is fantastic. So yeah, I guess a touch bar would be nice, but I'm trying to just abandon that dream. Um, am I going to review the M2 MacBook Air? Yes, I plan to. I don't really see a point in trying out the M2 MacBook Pro because all I can really do with it is open Geekbench and just compare to see how the M2 performs next to the M1 Max, which I'm sure it's going to be like, wow, yeah, it's faster than M1, but not as fast as the M1 Max. I could tell you that now. I could do this live stream right now and look at the Geekbench results, even before Marquez and your average consumer and iJustine, before all of them unbox and talk about the M2 MacBook Pro. I can just look up the results, and any channel can just run an export test. So there's no new design to judge, and there's no new display or anything. It's just so similar to MacBook Pros I've looked at for years that I just don't think it'd be very interesting. I don't think I have much to say. It would basically just be comparing Geekbench results, but the MacBook Air is a redesign. There's some changes there. They've got a bigger display now. It's a brighter display. It's a new chassis, and it's a thinner design. It's super lightweight, and there's a new color option. So there's a lot of things to like react to and just kind of get a feel for. Just hold it and manage the weight and see how that compares. And I just think it'd be more fun to review the MacBook Air. So that's what I'm waiting for. iPhone 12 battery dies really quickly, but I'm hoping future updates fix that. Oh yeah, if you're on beta, for sure. Didn't you say the price of switching every year is the same as the price of switching every 4 years? I don't think that's what the conclusion of that video was. I think we deducted that upgrading every year ended up costing about $200 a year if you're able to resell and recoup around 80% of the cost. Assuming you're buying $1,000 iPhones each year, but that's probably less and less likely. I don't think the conclusion was it's the same price as upgrading every 4 to 5 years. I think it's just a difference of a couple $100. But my point was more that I'm more voting with my wallet. I just don't think that the changes of the 14 Pro Max are worth even $100. Even if even when you're recouping a lot of the cost of your last iPhone to pay for the next one, I'm saying like even those changes aren't worth it. And I want Apple to try harder. I want Apple to figure out features that I could use more frequently and say like, okay, yeah, I do plan on using this iPhone because I need those features, or I will appreciate those features. Whereas right now, nothing the 14 Pro has going for it looks like anything I would appreciate or utilize very much at all. So yeah, I don't think it's the same price as upgrading every 4 to 5 years, but it does work out to be about the same if you upgrade every year to every 4 years. I remember breaking down the math on that, and I think it was a difference of a couple $100. It depends on what you can resell the phone for. Some people can recoup a lot of the cost. Sometimes you can't, especially when there's price hikes. And I also just think with the recession and the cost of everything going up, and I'm sure the prices of iPhones will go up, I don't think it will equal out being about the same. I'm just waiting for iPhone 15 for USB-C, hopefully. USB-C would be nice. I don't plan on upgrading just for that. They would have to come up with something else to sway me. But with the European Union finally passing that law, that does absolutely put a lot of pressure on Apple to adopt it. So, hi, Chris. What are we talking about? Basically, whatever the chat brings up. We started the live stream off with the M2 performance results being kind of across the board about 20% faster than M1, which was already pretty good. So it's looking fairly promising, and we're even seeing the M2 MacBook Pro for $1,300 outperform the multi-core of the base model Mac Pro, despite costing $5,000 less, which is pretty crazy. It also depends if you go through the carrier and pay monthly for the iPhone. Yeah, that's a whole different thing, which I don't plan on doing. I'm very happy with Mint Mobile. I never looked back when I left Verizon. Verizon annoyed the crap out of me. I hate their account management stuff, and I hate their prices. And, not a sponsor or anything, but I genuinely just really appreciate Mint Mobile. Just the affordability and the deals they have, and the quality of the service has been great for me. The coverage has been fine, and the speeds have been good. So I'm very happy sticking with Mint, and I don't plan on doing the phone upgrade through them or whatever. Let's see. Well, I'm still a fan of Apple. The M1 iPad really disappointed me with the software and false idea of it being a laptop. Do you think there will ever be a true hybrid device market? There is. I wouldn't say it doesn't exist. I just think certain brands and certain companies blur the line better than others. You know, like Microsoft has their Surface line, which is like, see, we make tablets, but in order for you to do much with those tablets, the software is so built for keyboard and mouse. I feel like very little can be done with those devices once you disconnect the keyboard and trackpad. Um, and a lot of the UI, at least the last time I tried it, they may have changed it a lot, and I don't really have much interest now that I have my MacBook. I don't have much interest in testing out a Surface Pro, but at least the last I tried it, there was a lot of features that were clearly not working or not optimized for if you didn't have a keyboard and trackpad attached. Does Mint Mobile even have 5G? Yes, every plan comes with 5G by default. It's not that big a thing. How much does Mint Mobile cost a month? Their base tier is $15 a month. This is going to sound like a paid thing, but I'm not getting paid to say this. This is not a sponsorship or anything. Mint Mobile does not pay me. But they just announced something which I thought was kind of crazy, because they said other carriers are raising prices and we're in this inflationary environment. But for like the next 2 weeks, if you sign up with Mint, every plan is $15 a month, even the unlimited data plan. Which I was like, what? How are they doing that? I was like, please don't go bankrupt. I'm worried they're going to go bankrupt because their prices are too low. But they seem to be okay, and they do all kinds of temporary promos like that. Like I think it was last year, they said a lot of carrier companies are going to spend millions or billions of dollars on Super Bowl ads. So instead of Super Bowl ads, we're just going to give away like a few $100 million worth of service. So if you signed up for Mint during the Super Bowl, it was like free for 3 months or free for 6 months or in a year or something. It uses the T-Mobile network, so I've gotten 400, 500 megabits down on Mint. It's not slow. Anything you use your phone for, it's the it's the kind of 5G that everyone actually uses. I don't think you get ultra wideband, but I never would have got that on Verizon anyway, and you probably wouldn't either. So I'm very happy with it. Now on AT&T, I still get worse service in my area compared to when I was temporarily using Mint. Well, there you go. It's very subjective. It very much depends on where you are. Obviously, where I am, Mint Mobile's great, but you may live in an area where T-Mobile coverage isn't very good. So I can't just blanket statement say it's great for all of you, because I don't know where you are. For certain people, AT&T may be better. For certain people, Verizon may be better. But I heavily encourage people to look at the MVNOs, like the sub carriers that offer discounts, because the prices that Verizon and AT&T charge are just insane. It's crazy. Years ago, my mother constantly got extra fees added to her Verizon account. I was the lucky person who had to deal with customer service people who never cared. Oh my God. I know exactly what that was like, James. It's crazy. The number of add-ons and extra fees they tack on, and they change their plans every day. They offer some new tier, and then they make it all complicated if you want to manage your account or change something. They're like, well, you better just show up to one of our locations, and then they blow all this money on their brick and mortar stores. Ugh, it's annoying. Can you do a speed test? Mint is actually something I've given serious thought. I could. It's kind of pointless because we all live in different places and we all have different distances to the tower, and it all kind of depends on where you are and how busy the traffic is in your area. But I can assure you I've gotten plenty fast speeds. I don't have Verizon in front of me, so I can't compare. I can't show you what Verizon would be in my area, but let me run one. Let's see. It's over 400. Oh, it's going to hit 5. Almost. Not quite. But yeah, at least in terms of download, it's about over 400. Upload, as always, is not quite as fast, but it's a phone. So it's not home internet levels of upload speed. Luckily I get faster upload with T-Mobile home internet, which is cheaper than Starlink and cheaper than Comcast, and thankfully that's been pretty stable as of lately. There's been a couple times in the past few months where it's dropped out for multiple days, which annoys the crap out of me. But yeah, the download speeds are plenty, I think, for anything you do on a phone. I don't think people need gigabit on a phone. They have to invent use cases. Well, what if I'm going on a flight and I want to download 8 movies? It's like, okay, I guess you could. If you know a flight's coming up, you could probably do it over Wi-Fi. But whatever. Um, you've got T-Mobile home internet. You can compare it to that. I could, but I don't want to mess with the. I'm live streaming right now, so it's not going to be an accurate reading anyway, because the upload performance is way different when I'm not live streaming, and so whatever. All I'm saying is where I live, it's fine. Dennis says MVNOs are where it's at. Drew Tiller. Whoa, okay. Even Dennis here is telling us that's where the MVNOs are, and I'm like a newbie. I'm not like well versed in all the cellular data plans and all the options out there. Dennis is an expert here. He's from the Best Cell Phone Plans podcast that they had me on, which was a lot of fun, and he knows like all the plans. He knows everything when it comes to internet performance and ISPs and cellular carriers. And even he's saying, I think if you're in an area where T-Mobile is not great, another great option that I would probably consider in the event that Mint Mobile goes under or goes bankrupt. Please don't. Please stick around, Mint. But if they did, I would probably try out Visible. I've had several friends with Visible, which is an MVNO of Verizon. So they use the Verizon network, and I think all of their plans are unlimited data, but they cost more than Mint. I think it's like $25 a month, and then you can like join these circles and you get a discount to make it $25 a month or something like that. But it's definitely cheaper than Verizon, and you get the Verizon network and you get 5G and all that stuff. So if I was a more hardcore data user, because I work from home, so I'm using Wi-Fi most of the time. I just use cellular data occasionally on trips and stuff. But if I needed more hotspot data, I would probably go to Visible. I've had my friend Nick on the Tech Podcast uses them, and he likes them. So yeah, it just kind of depends where you are. That's one downside of Mint. You cannot add the Apple Watch to the network, but I had to like invent use cases when I had Verizon and I added the Apple Watch cellular plan. There was not that many times I was using it. I was having to like intentionally leave my phone behind. Um, I was like trying to remember like, oh yeah, I don't need to bring my phone, so I would leave it behind and use the cellular feature. But there was not a ton of examples or areas where the Apple Watch was away from my phone anyway. Best Phone Plans podcast is thank you for the shout out. You're welcome. Okay, Dennis says Visible is not a good company. He says Verizon, US Mobile, or Mobile X are the two go-tos. So wait, those are two. I've never heard of Mobile X, but if Mint goes under, I'd have to check them out. But so far, I'm very happy with Mint, and I don't plan on changing it. Anyway, let's see. iPad Air 2017 3rd gen has 10.5-inch square display. Do you think they can use that display in 10th generation iPad with iPad Air A14 design? They could. The only downside is that the leak about it switching to Type-C throws all that off for me. I don't see a solution where they adopt they keep the home button in the forehead and the chin with the old iPad design, but then they also switch to USB-C. That doesn't work for me because, I don't know, just the concept of making an Apple Pencil 1 with a USB-C connector on the end just doesn't sound like Apple to me. I think they know that the Apple Pencil 1 was a bad design, and obviously the Apple Pencil 2 is much better. So if you're switching to Type-C on the iPad, I think you kind of have to go squared off. There's no way around that. In the glass design of the budget iPad and that iPad Air 3 you're describing, I don't think that's super compatible with the flat edge design. It's like it's a different glass configuration. And I've read, there's a lot of comments bringing up that the non-laminated displays are much easier to repair because you don't have to replace as much. So I would, I still am under the belief. Some people disagree with me, which is fine because we're in speculation zone right now. So I don't know what for sure is going to happen, and I don't have sources or anything. But my prediction is just that they're going to make something that looks like the iPad Air, but it'll be thick, and the bezels will be pretty large, and it won't be a laminated display. So it'll be kind of ugly, which I think is somewhat of the point of the budget iPad. It can't look pretty, otherwise it would kill the sales of the other iPads. So it has to be like somewhat ugly, and I think it's just going to look like a different kind of ugly from the current budget iPad. Yeah, kind of like what Katrina just said. It'll be like an iPad Air 4 with a non-laminated display. Sorta. I think the bezels have to be bigger too because it's a 10.5-inch panel, not 10.9. And I do think that they want to reuse keyboard accessories. I don't see them making a whole separate keyboard case just for the budget iPad. I think they'll want to reuse the keyboard case from the iPad Air and the iPad Pro 11-inch. That's my guess. Again, sometimes I guess things wrong. We could be way off. It's Ugly 2.0. Yeah. it's a new version of Ugly. Autocorrect added a period. I meant if you want Verizon coverage, you should use US Mobile or 2 Mobile X. Well, those both sound good, but I'll take your word for it because I know Dennis has basically tested and reviewed every phone carrier. he has like all of it down, so Dennis's opinion matters a lot. So I'll take your word for it. You can have the modern iPad squared off chassis with USB-C, but still have the forehead and chin. I don't know. That just doesn't visually work well with me. I don't know. That doesn't sound right. That they would like change this whole chassis, but then still keep the home button in the forehead. Yeah. Because like, is it cheaper to put the home button? Is it cheaper to put Touch ID in the power button or the home button? And that home button is still physical. It's like, I'm trying to visualize a squared off iPad that keeps the home button in. They don't do that when they do these redesign. Like someone else brought it up in the comments that I thought made a lot of sense. Is like, okay, we got the future of the iPad design language in 2018, right? That's where the new iPad Pros came out. They got USB-C, they got the squared off edge, they got the Apple Pencil 2. And then what was it? Like 2 years went by. 2 years go by, and then they bring that design to the iPad Air. Now the iPad Air has a squared off edge. Now it has Apple Pencil 2. Now it has the smart connector on the back. Okay, so another couple years go, oh no, another year goes by. Hey, I don't know how to pronounce that. Soyoshi? I don't know. I'm probably butchering it. But thank you for becoming a channel member. That was nice of you. But another year goes by, and then they give this squared off Apple Pencil 2 supported edge design to the iPad mini. So, a few more years have gone by. Now the iPad mini has that squared off design. It only feels natural to me that, okay, iPad mini gets the squared off edge. Now another year goes by, and the budget iPad gets it. And they all get a slightly more scaled down version. And now that they're offering all of these software exclusives to the iPad Air 5 and the iPad Pro, they have the Stage Manager, they have the virtual memory swap, they have the external monitor support. The budget iPad will be missing a lot of those things, so even if the design is somewhat similar, I don't think Apple will care as much because they'll have reasons for you to, well, it doesn't have the M1, so it can't do blah, 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 or whatever. Last time I used a non-laminated display would be the iPod Touch 4th gen. Was that non-laminated? No, I guess you're probably right. James says, I still find it humorous that the front camera is better on the iPad than the rear camera. It's funny, but it makes sense. Like, I think the front camera on the iPad gets way more use than the back. So if you're gonna prioritize one, probably prioritize the front. Dennis says, I really want Microsoft to go all in on making a better Surface laptop running an ARM-based chip. Yeah, they've struggled with that. They did that Surface Pro X thing, and Windows just is trying to scale across so many different devices. It's harder to get the OS to be optimized for ARM, I feel like. Because there's like thousands of different models that all run Windows, whereas Apple only has like, maybe a dozen, not even a dozen max, all running Mac OS. So when you switch it over for ARM, you can optimize it, I think, a bit better. And they don't have gaming to worry about because it's a Mac. So Apple's being lazy with iPadOS because they have a monopoly on the tablet market. I don't know if it quite fits the definition of monopoly, but I do agree that they're being lazy with it. I think there's clear and obvious ways they could make it better, but I've ranted on that enough. If the bezels are bigger, then that would look really ugly. I think it looks ugly now. I think the budget iPad has to look ugly, to be honest. When will the M2 MacBook Air be available for pre-order? They haven't confirmed that. All they've said is July. They said it's coming in July, and that the M2 MacBook Pro will be available to order at 5 a.m. Pacific tomorrow. So if any of you out there are interested in getting the M2 chip in the Touch Bar equipped MacBook Pro tomorrow morning, mark your calendars if you're interested. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I would say wait for the MacBook Air if you want to. I think the M2 MacBook Air is a better buy. The ports are better. The design is better. The display is better. I think that the battery life isn't as good, but it has fast charging, and the M2 MacBook Pro doesn't fast charge. So I'm not the biggest fan of MagSafe, but with MagSafe on the MacBook Air, you can power it and have two vacant Thunderbolt ports. So to me, that's a win. That's like, okay, MacBook Air has better ports. And I don't think the cooling system results in that big a difference, to be honest. I know that they say it does, but I would say like 95% of use cases, especially if you're buying a MacBook Air or a Pro, a 13-inch Pro, if you're buying these kinds of Macs, 95% of the time, M2 without the fan is still going to perform great. It's still going to be very, very fast compared to M2 with a fan. Why are you anti MagSafe? Just because it complicates chargers on trips. You know, like I want to eventually get to the point where I can take one cable on a trip and just have one USB-C cord that charges everything, and the MagSafe just kind of adds this additional. I don't like the charging light. I actually put tape over mine because I was so annoyed of the charging light being so bright, so we like taped over it and made it black, and it doesn't match with the space gray. Luckily, the MacBook Air MagSafe matches, but I just don't find it. I don't find single-use ports very helpful. I prefer ports that do lots of different things. It's cool that it's braided, but I'm fine with USB-C charging. Like I would have been fine if there was no MagSafe on the new MacBooks. Like I don't subscribe to this idea of, oh, when you trip on the cable it comes out easy. It's like you're probably just charging your laptop improperly if you're stretching the cable across a walkway where your kids or pets are running by and tripping on the cord. It's like maybe just, we don't have MagSafe on, that kind of MagSafe we don't have on our phones and tablets and stuff, and it's fine. We have the little magnet stuff, but that's not really the same thing. The charging light is so convenient though. I don't find it convenient. Like most of the time you plug in your MacBook because the battery's low, or if it's, in my case, it's you keep it on your desk and you leave it plugged in all the time. So 100% for like weeks at a time, and the charging light's like green, I'm green, I'm green. And even at night when I'm like trying to go to sleep and trying to turn everything off, there's this big green light lighting up the whole room. I know it's at 100%. It's been at 100%, and it's going to stay there. I wish it'd be nicer if the light like went off after a minute or 2 minutes. So it's like, okay, I know what the battery is. But yeah, the new MacBooks can still charge with Type-C, which is why I'm not like, I didn't say like I wish they didn't put MagSafe on it. I'm just saying I wouldn't have cared if it wasn't there. I would, if the choice was between 4 Thunderbolt ports and 3 Thunderbolt ports with 1 MagSafe, I would take the 4 Thunderbolt ports. But it's not a big deal because I just don't have a USB-C cable that long that's braided. And I don't feel like buying one. I don't have like a 6-foot USB-C braided cable. I just have the USB-C cables that came with my iPad and stuff, and those aren't as long. USB-C doesn't have the charge light issue. Also, USB-C does not have such a rigid port design that it would pull the MacBook off your desk or something. Like I've tried that. I tried to trip back when I had the 2016 MacBook Pro. Everyone was complaining that it didn't have MagSafe. So I did several tests where I plugged it in via Type-C and intentionally tripped on the cord, and the cord still pops right off. It doesn't pull the whole laptop along with it. At least the MacBooks I've used are not that, like, older power cords that would dock in were really, really solid and really hard, and that would pull the whole machine with it. But USB-C is not that rigid, at least in my case. Um, I feel the M2 MacBook is exactly the Mac version of the AirPods 3 and the M1 Pro and Max MacBook Pro, obviously AirPods Pro. Yeah, the the Pro is the Pro. Yeah, that's true. My friend has a 25-foot USB-A cable. My God. What is your favorite M2 MacBook Air color? Well, I haven't seen it in person yet, but I really love the look of Midnight. I want to try that out, and if there was a Midnight MacBook Pro available back when I bought mine, I would have opted for that one. It looks great. Just it's the closest to matte black that we've ever gotten. And I've always wanted a matte black MacBook Pro. Space gray, I guess, was as close as I could get, but plugging in the MagSafe is so loud. I know it is. I've tripped over the USB cable for my 2020 Intel MacBook Pro a few times, and I've still yet to drop the laptop from it. Exactly. Thank you, May. It's the exact same thing. It's like USB-C doesn't have that problem. Like, what I ran into, because my wife has an old MacBook Pro that had MagSafe on it, was when you're using that, like in bed or on your lap, it's very easy to dislodge the connector. So I'd be like moving it around, and it would keep accidentally getting unplugged. I never ran into a situation where I was like, oh, thank God, someone tripped on the power cord and it came right out. I was like, that use case just never hit me. No, Elon Musk is not coming out with a cell phone. Don't believe anyone who claims they think that's happening. You see the battery charging in the OS itself. Right. Right. Like I've never wanted a charging light on my phone, on my watch charger, on my iPad charger. I've never been like, man, I wish it was orange when charging and green when full. It's like I will check the display if I need to know. That's it. Sustained workloads equals playing games for hours, or if you need to render a 5-hour video or something. Yeah, so for one, how many people are playing games on their Mac? Not that many. For two, how many people are rendering a 5-hour video on their MacBooks? I would say not particularly common use cases. So she says, upgraded from my M1 MacBook Air to base 14-inch MacBook Pro last week. I got lucky, managed to get one lightly used, and 6 months of warranty left for a little over $1,600. Wow, that's a pretty good deal. $1,600. That's nice. I knew inflation would affect the iPad 10 like it did the SE, but even that only went up $30. You really think it may go up $100 to $429, like you said in your video? I think that there's enough design changes that, yeah, it could go up that much, just because the iPhone SE was already at $400. But I think the profit margin on the budget iPad was lower than that, because there's so many people buy iPad accessories. Like pretty much every budget iPad they sold, they had like a guaranteed keyboard case sale and almost a guaranteed stylus sale. So I think their whole logic with the budget iPad is like you break even or you don't profit much at all, and you get your profits on the accessories, because iPads don't hold themselves up. So they're selling folio covers, they're selling keyboard cases, and everybody's buying those. So inflation, I do think, is going to start catching up once, for one, 5G adds cost to everything. And they're adding 5G to the budget iPad. So that's a almost guaranteed price hike. And then the redesign is going to require a lot of retooling, switching to Type-C. Pretty much any time you've switched to Type-C, it comes with a price hike as well. Any iPad that's adopted USB-C went up in price. So I see the 5G edition and the USB-C edition as like a double whammy for price hikes, which is why I could be wrong, but I would rather assume the worst and end up being wrong and have it be cheaper. That would be better. I think it's best to assume the price will be worse than you think, because then if you expect it to be $429 and it ends up being $350, okay, cool, you've got extra money. I know 5G on a budget iPad does sound wrong. I just want to know how many people are buying cellular on the budget iPads now. Like, I already thought that most people just use their phone's hotspot or just don't take their iPads with them that frequently that they would opt for the cellular option, let alone people buying the cheap iPad and paying for cellular. How common is that? Like, I don't know. On a phone, it's fine to not have a charging light because you can just tap the screen. With a MacBook, you have to open the lid to see if it's fully charged. Not really. I mean, you can lower the brightness all the way to a MacBook if it's at a desk setup, and I just don't think that what's that battery percentage at? You know, the charging light is not very specific. It's either full or charging. That doesn't give you very much info. So it could be at 1% or it could be at 99% and the charge light would still be orange. So I just don't find it delivering that much more info. Um, you plug it in overnight and you wake up to a full charge. Charging light is kind of unnecessary um, at that point. Does anyone remember how much 2017 iPad Pros were when they launched? Was it like 650 and 800 for smaller and bigger? I think that's about right. Yeah. We calculated it the other day. I remember we did a live stream the other day. It was probably like a year ago. Somewhere like a year ago, I added up all the money I had spent on Apple products total, just like all of them put together, and we had to look up the price for the 2017 Pros. I think it was like 650 or something like that starting. None of my iPads I've ever bought have had cellular. I never saw the point of it, and I don't know anybody that does it. So I'm curious. I think there'd be more people interested in cellular MacBooks, but Apple still doesn't want to do that. Um, I don't get why the budget iPad gets 5G, but not the 16-inch MacBook Pro with all this battery life. Like what? I'm a student going to major in engineering. I'm wondering if I should go for a binned or unbinned 14-inch MacBook Pro. My advice is typically if you have to ask, you should probably just go binned. The only people who should be specking out for the non-binned are those who know what they're going to be doing. So if you're on the fence, it's kind of my logic of like if in doubt, do without. You know, if you're undecided, you'll probably be fine with the binned. I don't think the difference is that noticeable. That was way back on Twitch. Oh my god, man, it was over a year ago then. 5G on cellular with a MacBook Pro. I think that would get so much data usage it would be bad. Cellular iPad is great to give to kids on the go, games and movies. You don't need cellular for either of those, can't you? Just hotspot. I don't get it. What does binned mean? Oh, I guess some people don't know. So basically, this is not a new concept. Okay, for the record, Apple does it, but so does Intel, so does AMD. Everybody who manufactures chips does this. But when you're mass producing silicon, what's turned out to be more efficient for manufacturing is that sometimes you can build a lot of something and you have like a yield, right? So if you have like 90% yield, that means 90% of what you build is working and built to expectations. It has an 8-core CPU and a 10-core GPU, and that's what you targeted and that's what you achieved. But then that final 10% has like a failure rate. So you're mass producing these chips and maybe 10% of them are like slightly broken. So instead of an 8-core CPU and a 10-core GPU, you now have a 7-core CPU and an 8-core GPU, and those extra cores didn't make the cut, so they're not working. So it's more efficient from the company than building all these chips and then just throwing away the ones that don't have all the cores working properly. You just sell those at a lower price. So we call those the binned options. So like the base model, let me pull it up here. It's easier to show when you're configuring. We'll switch to editing here. If I'm speccing out, it's probably very obvious on the 14-inch MacBook Pro. That's where the most binning is going on. If you're speccing out a MacBook Pro, they advertise that the M1 Pro has a 10-core CPU and up to 32-core GPU. Here we go. Don't worry, that's not my zip code. So this one is binned because the M1 Pro is advertised to have a 10-core CPU and a 16-core GPU, but they're mass producing these chips and not all of them have all of the cores activated or all of the cores working. So those ones that are binned that don't have all the cores working, they sell at a discounted price. So you can get an M1 Pro with an 8-core CPU, 14-core GPU. It'll still perform pretty good, but these ones will have all of their cores properly activated, and that results in better performance. So you have a lot of bidding going on with a 14-inch MacBook because you can choose one where all the CPU cores are active, but some of the GPU cores are not active. And it's not random. It's not like, oh, they might turn on one day. It's like, no, they're definitely not working. But the performance tests I've seen with the 8-core are still very good. It's still faster than M1. CPU-wise, it's close to the multi-core performance of the M2 non-binned, but still, even the binned one there with the 14-core GPU, that's 4 more GPU cores than the M2 has non-binned. So That's a very common practice. I know whenever I explain that to some people, they're like, why don't they just make them all good? It's like, this is just how manufacturing works. I found out since a few years ago with M1 that it's because of what you're explaining. Yeah, it's much more efficient to just sell the non working CPUs at a discount than it would be to throw them all away. Um, I definitely pay an extra $100 in a heartbeat for cellular on a MacBook. Wow, $100. I wonder if that would be a $100 add-on. I don't know. Christopher says, my hotspot is far from being reliable, though, so having the cellular on the iPad is amazing for me. I guess different strokes for different folks. I'm glad it is an option. Yeah, I've got nothing against the option. I just don't know that many people. Why is your hotspot not reliable? Like, what carrier are you using where the iPad having its own connection is more stable than just using the... I don't know. I've just never had hotspot. It's like, if the hotspot's not working, it's because you're in an area where cellular isn't good, which the iPad having cellular wouldn't solve that problem. My iPad mini was the first iPad I got with cellular, and man, it was a game changer. I wish the MacBooks had cellular. Well, that's good. If you're an engineer, it's better to actually go for a Windows laptop. The programs for engineering are on Windows, not much on macOS. That's pretty much everyone I know that uses Windows is because there's a program or a game that they can't get elsewhere. I don't know that many people that genuinely just like Windows as an operating system. Usually it's, I like Windows because it has X program. It has Autodesk, or it has this game, or it has Steam, or, it has this thing that you can't get on a Mac. So it's, I feel like people have to go with Windows. They don't really have much of a choice. Xfinity Mobile, I don't know, Drew, stop attacking me. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm sorry. I don't want it to sound like I'm attacking you. I want to understand why people opt for it, because I don't understand it, and I don't know anybody that does. M2 MacBook Air is around $1,400 starting in the UK when converted, so the iPad Pro starts at around $650 less than the Mac, and the Air is good enough, so a saving of $850. Well, I guess if you can live with an iPad OS and that gets the job done, yeah, just do that. Makes sense if you need to work on something in a train, car, or bus. Yeah, but you have a phone. Just use your phone's data. I'm not saying don't use it on the go. I'm just saying it's usually they charge you extra. Usually it's like an extra 10 or 20 bucks a month just to have cellular on an iPad, whereas Hotspot is usually free. Even on like the cheapest Mint Mobile plan for 15 bucks a month, there's Hotspot data. So they don't sell the 8-core GPU M1 Air anymore. No, so now the only M1 MacBook Air they sell is the binned option, but it's still fast. It's not like it's slower than the Intel chips that they were using before. And yes, certain people do go for macOS for specific programs. That's a big reason I'm on macOS is Final Cut. Even on Windows, I cannot find a video editing application that's as quick or as optimized and as fast as exporting as Final Cut is. Like my good friend Ross has this big custom work PC that he built himself with his big beefy GPU, and he has Adobe Premiere and, well, no, he used to have Adobe Premiere. Now he uses DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci, even with all that performance, cannot export a 4K at 60 video as quickly as Final Cut can on my M1 Max. So that's like, even if Microsoft came out with some really cool Surface hardware and they came out with their own silicon and it was really fast and the battery life was really good, even if they did all that, if it doesn't have Final Cut, it's very hard purchase for me to justify. Do you still have a working 10.5-inch iPad Pro? Yeah, I have actually both me and my wife's iPad Pros sitting here on my desk, closed, and my wife does not use hers, which is funny because this has the bigger display. This has 120 hertz. This has a better battery life than her iPhone SE2, but still, she does not use it. She'd rather just use her phone. That's more convenient for her, and I don't think iPadOS has much that's tempting her. And ever since you started supporting Subject Lift in iOS 16, I haven't needed my iPad for much at all. So I just can't justify it. The iPad has a large battery. iPhone will drain quickly when Hotspot is on. The old iPhone does not support 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. How much? What are you doing on your iPad that you need the 5 gigahertz? That you need the 5G? I don't know. I just don't understand it. I mean, the iPad has a larger battery, but it also has a larger display. So the total battery life is not that different. I guess I have a high battery life phone, so I like cannot kill this phone in a day because the battery life is so long. So I've used the hotspot plenty of times, and I think it's just, if you're worried about battery life, it's probably cheaper to buy a battery bank than it is to spend like 10 or 20 bucks a month. That's going to be like $100 to $200 a year in just cellular costs. Just buy like a $50 battery bank and use your hotspot. Then you spend a 20 month on actual cellular. After 2 years, you've spent at least an extra $500 or $600 just on the cellular plan. Yeah, that's a good point. You got to pay extra for the hardware of cellular, and then you pay an extra 10 or 20 a month. So you're right. After a couple of years, that's a lot of money. I wouldn't want to hurt my battery life on my iPhone if I had a MacBook with 5G. MacBooks I just could understand more, just because I feel like they can do more and they have more pro applications and they can post more. It's like, just even trying to upload a video on an iPad is this weird ordeal. You have to go through YouTube, and YouTube thinks you're a phone, and you're like, no, actually upload it like this. And it's like, oh, okay, you're uploading from an iPad. Good for you. You know, they treat you like a kid. Whereas kind of web meetings and online work you do on a laptop is more common. Have I scuffed the body of my 13 Pro? I don't notice any. I haven't seen any scuffs, but I don't really care if it gets any, because the steel, even with, it's always glossy. It always looks like this. It's just, I hate that look. So I don't look at my chassis very often anyway, but there's little like pieces of dirt and dust that collect, so it comes right out, but still. Would have preferred a matte finish if they did it. Yeah, YouTube on the iPad sucks. It's they still don't even put community tab posts. Those have been a thing for like 3 years, and they still won't put them on the iPad. So my new life goal is to go out and find scenarios to rationalize getting a 5G iPad. Oh my god, that's hilarious. I like how you have the same color smart cover and folio. Yeah, there wasn't that many color options to choose from, to be honest. I mean, both of these iPads were mine at one point. I mean, the 2018 Pro still is mine, but cellular iPads get often discounted because nobody buys them. I bet the resale value isn't as good, just because no one cares. I paid cash for mine from Apple, but I feel like people may only be able to afford an iPad by financing through a carrier, which means you would have to get a cellular one. Really? Do the carriers only sell cellular iPads? If they do, that's messed up. I did not know that, if that's the case. That almost sounds too bad to be true. I know the major carriers are bad, but are they that bad? Let's see. As someone who uses community posts a lot, that's the reason why I use YouTube on either my MacBook or iPhone, rarely my iPad. I know. There's just so many things that the iPad gets left out on. That's why it's sitting closed on my desk, and I'm honestly running out of use cases for it. I guess if I was a student and I was taking notes in class and stuff, it would be more useful. If I was drawing, if I was an artist. Basically, the Apple Pencil. That's what the iPad is. It's a vessel to justify the pencil. Like, I can't figure out anything in my daily life that I like utilize the iPad for. They sell cellular iPads with their own plans bundled. So you can't just get an iPad without cellular through your carrier. That's crazy. I did not know that. Well, I would say if the only way you can afford one is through financing through your carrier, you probably just shouldn't do it, to be honest. I was just saying, like, if that's the only way you could get it, probably just don't do it. It is the best drawing device in the world. I'll give it that. I love the Apple Pencil and its responsiveness, and I just don't use it for much anymore. The main thing I use my pencil for, you can go back and watch my video. The main reason I used the Apple Pencil was for video thumbnails. That was it. I wasn't drawing, and I'm not note-taking. I was just for masking out subjects and getting backgrounds right. And iOS 16 just completely killed that use case now. Because it's so easy. Like, I showed it to the channel members yesterday when I was making the thumbnail. It's insane how easy it is to make these thumbnails now. Like, I just went to the iPad Air webpage for my last video thumbnail. I screenshotted an iPad Air, and it was, there was stuff around it, there was text around it, and I was like, I want this to have a transparent background. So I literally just lifted this iPad, and it became a complete PNG with no masking, no pencil required. I just lift it straight out of the picture, drag it into GoDaddy Studio. I hate that name, but that's what the app is called. And boom, you can make thumbnails to your heart's desire. And I literally have saved hours of time already thanks to iOS 16. I can just be like, boop, I want that. Pull it out, drop it on the background. It's insane how much functionality my phone got with a single update. Like, that's by far my favorite feature. I was honestly quite annoyed when there was what was it? Oh, there was a poll. 9 to 5 Mac was running a poll, and they were like, what's your favorite new iOS 16 feature? And I was like, I'm going to vote for the subject lift. And that was not even an option in their poll. They didn't even list it. I mean, I love 9 to 5 Mac, and I like the articles they write, and I follow them for news and stuff, which I appreciate. But you guys should have added that to the poll. That would have absolutely been the first result. I would have voted for that. Like, just being able to lift any subject from any photo. Doesn't have to be taken on the iPhone. It could be anything. You take a screenshot of a picture offline and just lift the subject. Yeah, this is going to hurt Photoshop's bottom line. I thought I read they were going to make Photoshop for the web free or something. I think they're kind of giving up on the idea of that. But how accurate the subject lift is so useful. It's so accurate. It's bizarre, honestly, how good it works. I use my iPad for a lot of sketching design concepts and note-taking, so my Apple Pencil's seen a ton of use. That's great. I'm happy for you if you can get use out of it. I don't do note-taking like that. I guess I need to go back to school to justify my iPad's existence. I have an iPad Mini 6 through my carrier, but I only pay for the bare minimum data. 500 megabytes, and then I ignore the cellular data. 500 megabytes? What do you do, web browsing? Old iPhone battery will die quickly when Hotspot is on with smaller battery. Sometimes you can use iPad Hotspot to provide Wi-Fi to Mac. So it's like, okay, you don't upgrade your phone because the battery life, because it's an older iPhone and you don't want to buy a new iPhone. But you will spend $500 to $600 on cellular data instead of just using that money on a better iPhone with better battery life. I'm going to push back on that argument too, because it's a lot of money to pay monthly for cell data, in my opinion. Is the iPad with Apple Pencil any good for note taking? I think so. Yeah. No, I think it's great at that. That's kind of all it's good at. that's the only thing it is good at. Just find an iPad through Apple. There's a lot of cheap iPads on Certified Refurbished and Amazon Renewed and stuff. When will we get a sequel to the big HomePod? I can link 10 minis together, but they still don't have the bass I'm missing from the original HomePod. I just don't think they sell that well. The big ones is like you're trying to pitch to audiophiles, but also trying to make it like a home speaker. So I don't think the market's very big. I think if they do another HomePod, they have to put a display on it. They got to lean into the home aspect. It can't be about audiophile like sound quality. Because they've tried that and it didn't work. The first HomePod did not sell well. The Google Home Max did not sell well. All the best smart speakers are like sub $100. Or you could, yeah, Katrina brings up, or you could spend like $100 on a replacement battery for your iPhone if you're worried about the battery life going bad. Sold my iPad last year and bought a MacBook. Miss it a little bit, but the more I think about it, the more I realize I made myself use it to justify it. That's the point I'm at. Yeah, I need to come up with reasons to use it, and it's not natural reasons. My hotspot on 6-month-old iPhone 13 with T-Mobile is unusable. Really? Unusable. I don't know. Is the hotspot data so bad that you would spend $500 to $600 extra over the course of 2 years just for that? I don't know. I totally read, wow. The M2 performance results have leaked. And wow, this performance is unmatched by the competition. Check out our vague graphs on apple.com. I love the vague graphs. They're so funny. Here's the M2. Here's the M2 Pro. Look at the graph. Look at the performance units. So many performance gains. The line goes up there now. That makes it better. I know they got to come up with some visual to show how it's faster, but it doesn't work very well. Anyway, I appreciate. Oh, one more question. Still struggling to get a 14 Pro Basic or M2 Air Max. Price is the same, but looking for more portable for something. Yeah, well, you just answered your own question. You're not stupid for choosing the M2. No, like the M2 CPU is quite close to the binned M1 Pro, and you just said it yourself. You're looking for something more portable. That's what the M2 Air is for. Portability, absolutely. So I just in that little back and forth you had in your own message, I would say go with the M2 Air. That's me personally, but yeah, it's Nickelback. Tim Cook. Can someone Photoshop that? I was gonna do it, but I didn't make the time for it. I want a picture of that Nickelback meme with the graph, but it's Tim Cook. Has someone made that yet? They probably have. I think I read. I think I remember seeing it. Thank you for the super chat, Karen. I don't get the smart speaker craze. It's just a speaker with Siri. Like you can just turn on Hello Siri on an old device and leave it plugged in. I don't know if leaving it on an old device would be cheaper than just $100, but the HomePod Mini is a very good sound quality. It's nice to have devices that are playing their own thing instead of Bluetooth and you gotta tether it or whatever. Just having a device that can play music to itself is kind of nice. We use our Google Home Minis for that every now and again, and my wife still uses the Google Home Max in the kitchen pretty frequently. So it's nice to have a device that's playing things locally, but yeah, that's about it. I mean, not much more than that. People won't spend a lot of money on them, that's for sure. $5 per month for the 500 megabyte plan. I guess that's reasonable. Have you tried making thumbnails on the Mac before with the subject lift being on macOS Ventura? There's not... It's harder to do thumbnail design with keyboard and mouse, in my opinion. It's just easier to do with touch when you can like mask things and I don't know. Trying to photo edit with... I haven't found a great app for that on the Mac. And GoDaddy Studio is free, so if you don't have a free alternative on the Mac that you think would be better, then don't. It's not worth trying it. Anyway, I think I answered the bulk of it. They mentioned you in the most recent episode. Who? What podcast? I don't know what podcast that is, but anyway, day 2 of asking for your Jurassic World Dominion review. I don't know when I'm going to have the time to watch it. I'm very busy over the next couple weeks, but I'd like to see it. I just like those old actors. But anyway, I appreciate the super chats and for you guys tuning in. I got to get going here, but stay tuned for more content and more coverage of Apple and other stuff in the tech community, I guess, that kind of shows up. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.